Rain poured over Chicago, as if the sky had decided to wash away all the city's dirt at once. Emily Adams disembarked from the intercity bus with aching feet and a heavy heart, clutching against her chest a faded fabric suitcase that held everything she owned in the world. At 24, her eyes carried a maturity that didn't match her age, the kind of look of someone who grew up too fast, who learned early that life doesn't negotiate. The address scribbled on a paper already damp from the rain led her to the gates of the Lawrence Mansion, an imposing structure in the Lincoln Park neighborhood that seemed to defy time. The high walls were covered with ancient ivy, and the wrought iron gates had the weight of Chicago tradition. Emily pressed the intercom with trembling fingers, not from cold, but from nervousness. The voice that answered was firm but gentle. In a few minutes, a middle-aged woman opened the main door. Teresa, the head housekeeper, had a face marked by years of work, but the kind eyes of someone who knew how to recognize a lost soul. "You must be Emily," she said, analyzing the young woman from top to bottom without judgment. "Come in, girl. You're soaked." Emily was led through corridors that smelled of beeswax and history. The walls were covered with old portraits, men and women from another era who seemed to observe every movement with aristocratic curiosity. The wooden floor creaked softly under her wet feet, as if the house whispered secrets that only it knew how to keep. "Mrs. Rocha told me you have experience with children," Teresa said as they walked. "Young Benjamin needs attention. Since his mother, well, since he's been alone with his father, he's been very quiet for an 8-year-old boy." Emily nodded, trying to absorb all the information while admiring the discreet elegance of the place. There was something about the mansion that made her feel small, but not inferior. It was as if the house recognized in her someone who understood silence. "Mr. Henry is traveling," Teresa continued, climbing a marble staircase with a mahogany handrail. "He'll be back next week. Better that way, for you to get settled without pressure. He is, how to say, a man of few words." The room assigned to Emily was on the second floor, in a wing reserved for staff. It was simple but comfortable. A single bed with white sheets smelling of lavender, a light wood desk by the window, and a wardrobe that seemed to have been built to last decades. The window faced the inner gardens, where trees bent under the weight of rain like tired ballerinas. "Rest today." Teresa left clean towels on the bed. "Tomorrow I'll introduce you to Benjamin and explain the routine. Breakfast is at 7, lunch at noon sharp, and dinner at 8. In this house, punctuality isn't a virtue, it's an obligation." When she was alone, Emily allowed herself to breathe for the first time since she'd left Springfield. She had left behind a life that was never truly hers. Her pastor-father's house, where every gesture was measured by the ruler of morality, where every dream was pruned before it could bloom. She had grown up between sermons about purity and sacrifice, watching her mother wither in silence between pots and mandatory prayers. Emily's virginity wasn't an external imposition, but a personal conviction. She believed that the body was a sacred temple, and that surrender should happen when the heart trembled more than the flesh. At 24, she had never known a man's touch, had never felt desire burn on her skin like wildfire. But she had also never met a man who made her question these convictions. The next morning, she woke to the soft sound of footsteps in the corridor. The smell of coffee and sweet bread rose up the stairs like a warm invitation. Emily dressed, carefully choosing a simple navy blue dress that highlighted her brown eyes without drawing excessive attention. Benjamin was waiting for her in the living room, sitting in an armchair too big for his thin body. He was a handsome boy, with curly brown hair and eyes that seemed to hold too many questions for his age. When Emily approached, he studied her with the seriousness of an adult. "Are you going to leave too?" was the first thing he said. The question hit Emily like a gentle punch to the stomach. She knelt to be at eye level with the boy. "I don't plan to go anywhere," she answered honestly. "Why do you ask that?" Benjamin shrugged, but Emily could see the vulnerability hidden in the gesture. People always leave. They spent the morning together in the library, an environment that Emily immediately loved. The walls were covered from floor to ceiling with books from all eras, American classics, translated foreign works, old encyclopedias that looked like forgotten treasures. There were wine-colored leather armchairs strategically placed near the windows, creating perfect little reading nooks. Benjamin showed her his favorite books, talked about the characters as if they were close friends, and gradually relaxed in Emily's presence. She discovered that the boy was intelligent beyond his years, but carried a sadness that he himself couldn't explain. "Mom used to read to me every night," he said, leafing through a worn copy of The Little Prince. She did different voices for each character. "Would you like me to read to you?" Emily offered. The boy's eyes lit up for the first time since she had arrived. During the week, Emily integrated into the mansion's routine with natural ease. She helped Benjamin with his lessons, organized the library, assisted Teresa with minor tasks. The house had its own rhythm, like a living organism that breathed at a measured pace. The staff was small but efficient. Besides Teresa, there was Mrs. Nelson in the kitchen, a couple of gardeners who came twice a week, and John, the driver, who also took care of general maintenance. Everyone spoke about Henry Lawrence with a mixture of respect and caution. Mrs. Nelson said that he had changed completely after his wife's death. Before, he was sociable, laughed easily, participated in the winery's festivities with enthusiasm. Now he was an elegant shadow, present but inaccessible. "Poor boy," Teresa sighed. "His father loves him, that's certain, but he doesn't know how to show it. After Miss Annabelle died, it seems he forgot how to talk to children." Annabelle's death was a subject that hung over the house like a persistent fog. No one spoke directly about what happened, but Emily caught fragments of conversations. Strange circumstances, never found an explanation. Poor young woman, so young. What everyone knew, but no one said clearly, was that she had drowned in the lake at the winery on a moonless night 3 years ago. On Thursday afternoon, Emily was reorganizing some volumes in the library when she found a photo album forgotten. Between 2 French recipe books, the pages were slightly yellowed, but the images remained clear. Annabelle was indeed an extraordinarily beautiful woman. Blonde hair that looked like golden thread, blue eyes like summer sky, a smile that illuminated any environment. In the photos, she appeared embracing Henry in moments of intimacy, wedding, honeymoon, birthdays, trips. He seemed like a different person beside his wife, relaxed, smiling, young, despite being in his early 30s. Benjamin appeared in many images as a chubby baby, then a smiling child in his parents' arms. They were a perfect family in every sense. Emily was so absorbed in the photographs that she didn't notice when someone entered the library. A male voice, deep and controlled, made her start. "Those photos shouldn't be there." She turned quickly, the album slipping from her hands, and crashing to the floor with a dry noise. Henry Lawrence was standing at the entrance to the library, still dressed in a dark travel suit, briefcase in hand, his gaze fixed on the photographs scattered across the wooden floor. Emily had imagined him hundreds of times during the week, based on the staff's descriptions and the photos she had just seen, but nothing had prepared her for his physical presence. Henry Lawrence was handsome in a disturbing way, not the obvious beauty that draws attention in crowds, but the kind that disarms old defenses. Tall, broad shoulders, brown hair with precocious gray strands at the temples, dark eyes that seemed to read thoughts. There was a natural elegance about him that didn't depend on expensive clothes or studied posture. He was the kind of man who made the air change when he entered a room, not from arrogance, but from the silent intensity he carried like a second skin. "I'm sorry, sir." Emily knelt to collect the photos, her hands trembling slightly. "I was organizing the books and found the album. I didn't mean to intrude on anything personal." "Leave it," he said, his voice softer than expected. "I'll get it later." But Emily had already gathered most of the images. When she stood up to return, her fingers accidentally touched Henry's. The contact lasted only a second, but it was enough for a strange wave to run through her entire body, as if she had touched an exposed wire. Henry seemed to feel the same thing, because he retreated slightly, his eyes studying Emily's face. With new curiosity. "You're the new nanny," it wasn't a question. "Emily Adams," she introduced herself, trying to control her breathing. "I arrived last week." "How is Benjamin adapting?" "Well, he's a very intelligent boy. He likes to read, ask questions. He misses you." Something passed through Henry's eyes when she mentioned his son, a mixture of love and guilt that Emily immediately recognized. It was the same look she saw in the mirror when she thought about her father, complex affection, full of edges. "Teresa said you have a degree in education." "Yes, I worked 2 years at a school in Springfield before coming to Chicago." "Why did you come?" The question came with genuine curiosity, not as an interrogation. Emily hesitated. She couldn't say she had run away from home because she couldn't stand living under her father's suffocating rules anymore, because she felt she was dying of suffocation in that routine of forced prayers and silences. "I needed a change," she answered simply. Henry nodded, as if he understood exactly what she wasn't saying. "I hope you feel comfortable here," he said, picking up his briefcase. "If you need anything, you can talk to me or Teresa." He was already leaving when Emily gathered courage to speak. "Mr. Henry," he stopped, turning to look at her. "May I ask about the library? I mean, can I use the books when I'm not working?" A smile almost imperceptible passed across his lips. "Of course. Annabelle always said that books exist to be read, not for decoration." It was the first time Emily heard him mention his dead wife. The name came out of his mouth carefully, as if it still hurt to pronounce it after 3 years. "Thank you," she murmured. Henry nodded and left, leaving Emily alone with her racing heart and a strange feeling in her chest, as if something dormant inside her had begun to awaken. That night, during dinner, Benjamin transformed in his father's presence. The talkative and clever boy that Emily had known during the week became quiet, answering Henry's questions with polite monosyllables. There was no coldness between them. It was evident they loved each other. But there was a distance that neither knew how to bridge. Emily observed the family dynamics while eating in silence, seated at the smaller table intended for staff. Henry tried to talk with his son about school, friends, activities, but his questions sounded too formal. Benjamin responded with the politeness of someone who was educated not to disappoint, but Emily could see that he wanted more. He wanted his father to ask about the books he was reading, about the drawings he made on rainy afternoons, about the dreams he had at night. After dinner, Henry disappeared into his office with piles of documents from the winery. Emily helped Benjamin with his bath and put him to bed, reading a few pages of The Little Prince with different voices for each character, as his mother used to do. "Emily," Benjamin said, just as she was about to turn off the light. "Yes?" "Do you think Daddy likes me?" The question broke her heart. "I'm sure he does," she answered, returning to sit on the edge of the bed. "Sometimes grown-ups don't know how to show what they feel, but that doesn't mean they don't feel it. Mom knew how to show it." "You're Mother must have been a very special person. She was, Benjamin sighed. She sang when she cooked. Daddy stopped singing after she went away. Emily remained silent, not knowing what to say to ease the pain of this boy who had lost his mother so early. "Can you sing for me?" he asked timidly. "I don't sing very well." "It doesn't matter." Emily hummed a gentle song that her own mother used to sing when she was little, before religion became a prison in her home. Her voice came out trembling at first, but gained confidence when she saw Benjamin relax and close his eyes. When she went down to her own room, she passed by Henry's office. The door was ajar, and she could see him in profile, bent over papers, with a cup of coffee cooling next to his elbow. The light from the lamp cast shadows on his face, accentuating his concentrated and slightly melancholic expression. There was something about him that awakened in Emily an instinct she couldn't name. It wasn't just physical attraction, although that existed in an undeniable form. It was the recognition of a soul that, like hers, carried invisible weights. It was the perception that behind that controlled facade was a man who also didn't quite know how to live. Emily went to her room, but it took her a long time to fall asleep. When sleep finally came, it brought confused dreams where she walked through endless corridors looking for something she couldn't find, while a male voice called her from far away. The following days brought a new routine to the Lawrence mansion. Henry hadn't traveled again since he'd returned, and his constant presence changed the dynamics of the house in a subtle but noticeable way. Emily began to notice small details that had previously gone unnoticed. The sound of masculine footsteps descending the stairs at 6 in the morning, the aroma of the stronger coffee he preferred, the soft noise of newspaper pages being turned in the office. Benjamin flourished with his father around. There was still that polite distance between them, but the boy tried harder to get attention. He told elaborate stories about the books he read, showed drawings made at school, asked intelligent questions during dinner. Emily noticed that Henry was also trying, but there was a rigidity in him that seemed to have been built over 3 years of silent mourning. It was on a Saturday morning that everything began to change irreversibly. Emily was in the library, organizing some volumes that Benjamin had left scattered when she heard raised voices coming from the office. The door was closed, but the sounds traversed the solid wood with enough clarity for her to distinguish Henry's voice and that of another man, deeper and harsher. "You can't keep hiding forever, Henry," said the unfamiliar voice. "The winery needs social presence. Clients are starting to ask questions." What kind of questions? Henry's response sounded controlled, but Emily detected an underlying tension. "About you, about Annabelle, about what really happened that night." The silence that followed was so heavy that Emily involuntarily held her breath. "Nobody knows what happened that night," Henry finally spoke, each word measured with surgical precision. "Not even me." "That's exactly what's feeding the speculation. You need to start appearing in public again, show that you've overcome the tragedy. The Harvest Festival is coming up. It's the perfect opportunity." "I'm not going to use my wife's memory as a marketing strategy. This isn't about marketing, it's about survival. The competition is taking advantage of your absence to steal contracts. If you don't do something soon, you might lose everything that Annabelle also worked for." Emily knew she shouldn't be listening, but something about the mention of the dead wife's name kept her paralyzed where she was. There were layers to that conversation that she didn't understand, but that awakened a dangerous curiosity. I'll think about it," Henry said, indicating that the meeting was over. Emily quickly moved away from the door, pretending to be absorbed in organizing books when the men left the office. The visitor was a middle-aged man, grey hair, impeccable suit, but there was something in his eyes that she couldn't define, a shrewdness that bothered her. "Emily," Henry called her, making her start. "This is Alexander Morgan, my partner at the winery." "Pleasure to meet you." Alexander extended his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "So you're the new nanny. Teresa speaks very well of your work." "Thank you." Emily shook his hand briefly, feeling an unpleasant shiver. "Henry, we need to talk about the harvest numbers too," Alexander continued, ignoring Emily. "Perhaps over lunch on Monday?" "We'll see," Henry responded evasively. After Alexander left, Henry remained in the hall for a few minutes, looking out the window with a thoughtful expression. Emily pretended to continue working, but observed his movements in the reflection of a bookcase glass. There was something about him that awakened her protective instinct, not pity, but the recognition of someone who carried burdens too heavy for one person. "Mr. Henry," she said, gathering courage, "may I ask a question?" He turned, eyebrows slightly raised. "Of course. Benjamin asked if you could visit the winery together. He's very curious about your work." Henry seemed genuinely surprised. "He said that?" "Several times. I think he wants to understand better what you do, to feel part of your world." "And you think it would be a good idea?" "I think it would be an excellent idea," Emily answered honestly. "For both of you." Henry remained silent for a few moments, processing the suggestion. "Would you like to come too?" he asked, so unexpectedly that Emily almost dropped the book she was holding. "Me? Benjamin feels more comfortable with you around, and—" he hesitated, as if navigating unknown territory. "You could get to know better the place where I work." The invitation was simple, but there was something in the way he looked at her that made Emily's stomach do strange flips. "If you think it's appropriate." "I do," he said, and for the first time since she had met him, there was a trace of genuine smile on his lips. "Tomorrow morning, after breakfast." That night, Emily could barely sleep. She didn't know if it was anxiety about the outing or the prospect of spending an entire day in Henry's company, away from the watchful eyes of the mansion staff. There was something growing between them. She wasn't naive enough to deny it, but she also wasn't experienced enough to know how to deal with it. The winery was 40 minutes by car from the mansion, in a mountainous region where the air was cleaner and the silence deeper. Henry drove confidently along the winding roads, Benjamin chattering in the back seat about everything he saw through the window, and Emily sitting next to the driver, trying not to notice too much the way the masculine hands held the steering wheel. "Look, Daddy, the grapes!" Benjamin shouted when the first vineyards appeared. "Those are grapevines, son," Henry corrected gently. "The grapes grow on them." The property was impressive. Acres of vines spread across the hills in organized rows that looked like green waves getting lost on the horizon. The winery's main house was a building in colonial style, with white walls and red tiles, surrounded by well-kept gardens and a panoramic view that took your breath away. "It's beautiful," Emily murmured, getting out of the car and feeling the gentle breeze carrying the sweet aroma of ripe grapes. "Annabelle used to say the same thing," Henry said without thinking, and then seemed to be surprised by his own words. They walked through the vineyards, Henry explaining the cultivation process with a passion that Emily hadn't imagined existed in him. His eyes came alive when he talked about the different grape varieties, about the necessary care in each season, about the patience that wine demanded. Benjamin absorbed every word like a sponge, asking intelligent questions that visibly made his father proud. "Can I try a grape?" the boy asked. "Of course." Henry picked a ripe bunch and offered it, "but be careful, they're sweeter than regular grapes." Benjamin bit into a fruit and made a face of surprise. Wow, it really is super sweet. Would you like to try too? Henry offered the bunch to Emily. When she took a grape, her fingers accidentally touched his, and again that strange electricity ran through her body. Henry felt it too, because his eyes fixed on her lips when she bit into the fruit. "It's delicious," she said, and there was something in the way she pronounced the word that made Henry swallow hard. They visited the production area, where huge, stainless steel tanks housed the wine in the fermentation process. The smell was intoxicating, a mixture of sweetness and acidity that made your head spin. Emily watched Henry explain each step to his son and noticed how he transformed there. He was another man, more relaxed, closer to who he really was. "Daddy," Benjamin said during one of the pauses in the explanation, "can you teach me how to make wine when I grow up?" "If you want to learn," Henry replied, his voice laden with emotion. "This winery will be yours one day." "And Emily's too?" The boy's innocent question created an awkward silence. Emily felt her face heat up, and Henry seemed not to know how to respond. "Emily won't stay with us forever," he said finally, but there was something reluctant in the way he pronounced the words. "Why not?" Benjamin insisted. "She's nice, and she makes you smile." "I smile," Henry protested. "Not like you smiled at Mommy," the boy said with the cruel honesty of children, "but with Emily, you smile similarly." Emily felt her heart dangerously accelerate. Henry glanced at her sideways, and she saw something in his eyes that made her forget to breathe. It wasn't just desire, it was recognition, as if he too had realized that something special was happening between them. They had lunch on a veranda of the winery house that overlooked the lake where Annabelle had died. The water was calm, reflecting the white clouds like a perfect mirror, but Emily felt something sinister in that tranquility. Benjamin played in the nearby gardens, giving them moments of more intimate conversation. "Alexander is right about one thing," Henry said, toying with the wine he had served to accompany lunch. "I've isolated myself too much after Annabelle's death." "It's understandable," Emily responded. "Losing someone we love changes everything." "Have you ever lost someone important?" Emily thought about her mother, who had died of cancer when she was 18, leaving her alone with a father who became even more rigid in his wife's absence. "My mother," she said simply. "I know how it is." "How did you handle it?" "Poorly," she admitted with a sad smile. "For a long time I thought I had to carry the pain as penance, that forgetting would be betrayal." "And now?" Emily looked him in the eyes, feeling a deep connection establishing between them. "Now I think we honor those we love by living fully, not by dying with them." Henry was silent for a few minutes, processing her words. "Annabelle used to say something similar," he said finally. "She always said that life was to be lived intensely, without fear of getting hurt." "She seemed to be a special person." "She was," Henry agreed. But for the first time his voice didn't carry only pain when, speaking of his wife, "But she's gone, and I'm still here. With a beautiful son who needs his father alive, not a shadow of what he was." Henry studied her with new intensity. "How do you manage to speak such difficult truths so naturally?" "I grew up in a house where lying to yourself was a greater sin than any other," Emily answered. "I learned early that the truth hurts less when we face it head on." "And what is your truth, Emily?" The question caught her off guard. What was her truth? That she was falling in love with an inaccessible man. That for the first time in her life she felt desire burning on her skin like wildfire. That every time he looked at her, she felt all her convictions about purity and waiting dissolving like a sandcastle. "I'm still discovering it," she answered honestly. Henry leaned slightly over the table, bringing his face closer to hers. Can I help you discover it?" The air between them became charged with electricity. Emily felt her lips tingle, her heart race, her whole body vibrate at a frequency she had never experienced. For a moment, it seemed that Henry was going to kiss her right there, on the veranda where his wife had lunched so many times. But Benjamin chose exactly that moment to return running, with a bouquet of wildflowers in his hands. "For you, Emily," he shouted, extending the flowers with a radiant smile. "I found them in Mommy's garden." Emily received the bouquet with trembling hands, grateful for the interruption that had saved her from doing something that could complicate everything. "Thank you, Benjamin. They're beautiful." Henry moved away, recomposing his posture, but Emily could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands closed and opened as if they wanted to touch something they couldn't reach. The way back was quieter than the journey there. Benjamin fell asleep in the back seat, tired from the day in the open air, and Emily was hypnotized by the movement of Henry's hands on the steering wheel, by the way he bit his lower lip when he was concentrating, by the sexual tension that filled the car like dense fog. When they reached the mansion, the sun was already setting, tinting the sky with oranges and pinks. Henry helped Benjamin out of the car, carrying the sleepy boy in his arms with a tenderness that made Emily's heart tighten. "Can you take him to his room?" he asked Emily. "I need to make some calls." Emily nodded, but when she passed by him to take Benjamin, Henry gently held her by the arm. "Thank you for today," he said, his voice low and husky. "It's been a long time since I've seen my son so happy. He just needed to feel that you were truly present." "And you?" Henry asked, still holding her arm, his thumb making small circles on her skin through the fabric. "What do you need?" The question was loaded with implications. Emily felt her entire body react to his touch, to the possibilities implicit in his voice. "I need—" she began but couldn't finish. "Say it," he whispered, coming so close that Emily could feel the heat of his body. "I need you not to look at me like that," she said, finally being honest. "Like what?" "Like I'm more than just your son's nanny." Henry let out a low, almost bitter laugh. "Emily, you stopped being just anything the day you arrived here." Before she could respond, he moved away, leaving her alone in the hall with Benjamin in her arms, and her heart beating so hard it felt like it would explode. That night, after putting Benjamin to bed and telling the usual story, Emily went down to get a glass of water in the kitchen. The house was silent, everyone already retired to their rooms, but when she passed by the office, she saw the light still on and the door ajar. Henry was sitting at the desk, but he wasn't working. He was just looking out the window, a glass of wine in hand, a lost expression, as if he were navigating deep memories. Emily knocked softly on the door. "Excuse me." He turned and she noticed that he had taken off his jacket and loosened his tie. There was something wilder about him like this, less controlled. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "I was thinking about what we discussed today." "About what, specifically?" Emily entered the office, closing the door behind her. She didn't know why she did this, perhaps because she felt that the conversation they were about to have needed privacy. "About truths," she said, approaching the desk where he was. "About living fully. And did you reach any conclusion?" "I did." Emily took a deep breath, gathering courage. "My truth is that I'm feeling things I've never felt before. Things that scare me, but also make me feel more alive than I've ever felt." Henry put the glass on the desk, rising slowly. "Emily, let me finish," she interrupted. "I know this is complicated. I know I'm just an employee, that you're still grieving, that there's an enormous difference between our worlds. But I can't pretend I don't feel anything when you look at me." "How do I look at you?" like you're feeling the same thing." Henry took a few steps in her direction, his eyes fixed on her face. "And if we're both feeling something that shouldn't exist, then at least we'll be honest about it." He stopped right in front of her, so close that Emily could see the small lines of expression around his eyes, smell the masculine perfume mixed with the aroma of wine. "You know I could ruin your life," he said, his voice so low it was almost a whisper. "And you know I could ruin yours," she responded with equal intensity. Henry raised his hand, touching Emily's face with his fingertips, as if she were made of crystal. "Are you sure about what you're doing?" "I'm sure that I'm tired of being afraid." It was then that he kissed her. It wasn't a gentle or hesitant kiss. It was a hungry, desperate kiss, as if both had been containing that need for too long. Emily felt her legs weaken, her hands closing on his shirt, all her senses concentrating on that moment of complete surrender. When they separated, both were breathless. "This changes everything," Henry said, resting his forehead on hers. "I know. I can't promise you anything. I'm not asking for promises." "What are you asking for then?" Emily looked him in the eyes, feeling that she was about to cross a line from which there was no return. "I'm asking you to stop pretending. You don't want me." Henry's response was to kiss her again, this time pressing her against the bookshelf, his hands getting lost in her hair, his whole body glued to hers in an urgency that spoke of weeks of repressed desire. When they finally separated, Emily knew that nothing would be the same again. She had crossed the line, and now she would have to deal with the consequences, whatever they might be. The days following that kiss were a delicious torture and embarrassing at the same time. Emily woke up every morning with his taste still in her mouth, with the memory of masculine hands in her hair, with the echo of her own audacity reverberating like distant thunder. Henry, in turn, seemed to have created a careful avoidance strategy. He left early for the winery, returned late, limited interactions to polite greetings in the presence of others. But there were moments when their gazes met by chance. During dinner, and the air in the dining room became thick as honey. Moments when he passed by her in the corridors, and the masculine perfume made her close her eyes involuntarily. Moments when she caught him watching her play with Benjamin in the garden, an indecipherable expression on his face, as if he were waging an internal war with himself. Teresa began to notice the tension, although she couldn't identify exactly what was happening. "You've been strange, girl," she said one morning while Emily helped fold clothes in the laundry room. "Distracted, with your head in the clouds. Is everything okay?" "I'm fine," Emily lied, focusing excessively on a shirt of Benjamin's to avoid the perceptive look of the older housekeeper. "And Mr. Henry has also been different. More nervous, you know. Yesterday I caught him looking out the library window. For 20 minutes straight doing nothing, just looking." Emily felt her heart accelerate. The library window overlooked the gardens, where she usually read with Benjamin on sunny afternoons. "Maybe he's worried about business," she suggested, trying to sound casual. "Could be," Teresa agreed, but there was doubt in her voice. "Or maybe it's time for him to start living for real again. 3 years of mourning is enough time for any man, especially a young one like him." The conversation was interrupted by Benjamin's arrival, who came running from school with his backpack and an excited expression. "Emily, Emily," he shouted. "The teacher said we can do a project about professions. Can I do one about a winemaker?" "Of course you can," she smiled, grateful for the distraction. "Your father will be proud. Will you help me research? That's what I'm here for." They spent the afternoon in the library, Emily helping Benjamin find books about viticulture and wine production. The boy was fascinated by everything he discovered. making careful notes in a blue notebook that he had decorated with drawings of vineyards. It was when he was leafing through an old book about the history of Illinois vineyards that they found something unexpected. Between the yellowed pages, there was an old photograph, not the typical family photo, but something that seemed to have been hidden deliberately. The image showed a young Annabelle, perhaps 20 years old, embracing a man who was definitely not Henry. She laughed with a spontaneity that Emily had never seen in the official family photos, her hair loose in the wind, wearing a simple dress that contrasted with the refined elegance she demonstrated in later images. The man beside her was tall, dark hair, captivating smile, and there was something familiar about his features that made Emily furrow her brow. She turned the photograph, looking for some identification, and found a date written in pencil, summer of 1998, our eternal secret. "Who is that man with Mommy?" Benjamin asked, looking over Emily's shoulder. The question made her start. She had completely forgotten the boy's presence, absorbed in the strangeness of that discovery. "I don't know," she answered, quickly putting the photograph in her pocket. "It must be some old family friend." Benjamin seemed to accept the explanation, but Emily couldn't get the image out of her head. There was something disturbing about that intimacy between Annabelle and the unknown man, something that suggested much more than friendship. And why would the photo be hidden in an old book, away from the family's official albums? That night, after putting Benjamin to bed, Emily went down to the kitchen to get a glass of water, but in reality she hoped to find Henry. He had created the habit of staying up late in the office, and she knew he always passed through the kitchen to get coffee before retiring. It was no different this time. Around 10:30, she heard the familiar footsteps coming down the stairs. Her heart raced when he entered the kitchen and found her sitting at the small table where the staff took quick meals. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "I was thinking." "About what?" Emily hesitated. Should she show him the photograph? Would it be a violation of privacy? But something in that image deeply disturbed her, a feeling that there were secrets in the Lawrence family that went beyond the mysterious death of Annabelle. "I found something today," she said finally, taking the photo from her pocket. It was in an old book in the library. Henry approached to see what she was holding, and when his eyes focused on the image, all color drained from his face. He snatched the photograph from her hands with a violence that frightened her. "Where did you find this?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Between the pages of a book about viticulture, Benjamin and I were researching for a school project." "Did Benjamin see it?" "He saw it, but didn't ask questions. I said it was some old family friend." Henry ran, his hand through his hair, clearly disturbed. "Who is he?" Emily asked softly. "Someone who shouldn't be in this house, not even in a photograph." "Henry?" She used his first name for the first time, and the effect was immediate. He looked at her with renewed intensity, as if the sound of his own name in her mouth had broken some invisible barrier. "You shouldn't have found this," he said, but the anger had left his voice, replaced by a kind of resigned weariness. "But I did find it, and now I'm worried." "Why?" "Because for 3 weeks I've been living with this family. I see how you still suffer from your wife's death. I notice that there are secrets here that no one speaks about openly. And now I find a hidden photo of Annabelle with another man from a time before your marriage." Henry sat in the chair next to her, suddenly looking older, more vulnerable. "Do you really want to know?" "I do." He remained silent for a few minutes, turning the photograph between his fingers as if it burned. "His name is Joseph Adams," he said finally. "He was the pastor of an evangelical church here in Chicago. Annabelle met him when she was 19. in a rebellious phase of her life, when she was questioning everything her parents had taught her. Emily felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Adams, the same surname she carried, but there were thousands of Adams in America. It couldn't be such an absurd coincidence. "Did they date?" she asked, her voice coming out weaker than intended. "For almost 2 years. He was married, had a small daughter, but was separated from his wife." Annabel fell madly in love. There was bitterness in Henry's voice. She even converted, attended his church, talked about marriage. Emily's world began to spin. A small daughter, an evangelical pastor, separated from his wife at the time. The pieces fit together in a way she didn't want to accept. What happened? His wife died. Cancer. He became a widower with a 6-year-old daughter to raise alone. Annabel thought they could finally be together, but what? He ended everything, said he couldn't mix his ministerial life with a woman of dubious background. Annabel came from a rich family, had had other boyfriends, wasn't the type of wife the congregation expected for a pastor. Emily felt the ground disappear from under her feet. 6 years old when her mother died. Evangelical pastor, widower, only daughter. It was her. It was impossible, but it was her. What? What was the daughter's name? She asked, knowing she didn't want to hear the answer. Henry looked at her strangely. Why do you want to know? Please, just tell me. Emily. The name of his daughter was Emily. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily felt as if all the certainties of her life were crumbling like a house of cards. The father who had raised her with extreme moral rigidity, who never spoke about the past, who became even more severe after her mother's death, had had an affair with the woman who would come to be Henry's wife. Emily? Henry's voice came as if from very far away. What's happening? You've gone white. Joseph Adams is my father, she said, the words coming out like a confession forced out. Henry stared at her as if she had said something impossible. That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. Tears began to run down Emily's face. My mother died of cancer when I was 6 years old. My father is an evangelical pastor. He never talked about the past, never explained why he became so rigid after my mother's death. Now I know why. Emily. He chose his ministerial reputation over love, lost Annabel through cowardice, and then raised his daughter as if she were guilty of his sins. Henry stood up abruptly, beginning to pace back and forth in the kitchen. This is madness. You're telling me that the woman I've fallen in love with is the daughter of the man Annabel loved before me. I'm saying that destiny has a cruel sense of humor. He stopped pacing, looking at her with an expression that mixed desire, fear, and something that could be horror. Do you understand what this means? It means we're two people paying for our parents' mistakes. It means that this thing between us is even more impossible than it already was. Emily stood up too, approaching him with determination she didn't know she possessed. Or it means that we finally have the chance to write a different story, to be courageous where they were cowardly. Emily, you don't understand. I understand. Perfectly. I understand that you're afraid. I understand that this complicates everything. But I also understand that what I feel for you has nothing to do with Annabel or my father. It has to do with the man you are, with the way you look at your son, with the kindness you hide behind that severe facade. Henry looked at her as if he were seeing a ghost. Annabel used to say exactly that. That true love had nothing to do with the past, but with the courage to build a future together. Then maybe she was right. Or maybe it's happening again. Maybe I'm destined to lose all the women I love because of secrets and cowardice. Emily came closer until she could touch his face with her fingertips. The difference is that this time you know all the secrets from the beginning. There's nothing hidden between us. "Yes, there is," he said, capturing her hand and pressing it against his chest. "There's the fact that I'm in love with you, and that terrifies me." Emily's heart almost stopped. He had said it. He had finally said it. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because I can't protect those I love. I couldn't protect Annabelle. I can't protect Benjamin completely, and I won't be able to protect you." "Protect me from what?" Henry hesitated, as if deciding how much he could reveal. "There are things about Annabelle's death that weren't clarified. People who didn't want certain truths to come to light." "What kind of truths?" "Annabelle was investigating some irregularities in the winery's business. Suspicious contracts, missing money, ghost partnerships. She had discovered that someone close was embezzling funds for years." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "And you think she was killed for that?" "I don't know what to think. Officially, it was an accident. She was walking alone at night near the lake, slipped and drowned. But Annabelle swam like a fish since childhood. And what was she doing alone at the lake at 11 at night?" "Did you tell the police about her investigations?" "I didn't find any proof. All the papers she was analyzing disappeared. Her computer was wiped clean, as if someone had systematically erased any evidence of what she had discovered." "And now you think this same person might come after me?" Henry pulled her into his arms in a sudden and desperate movement. "I don't know, but I'm not going to risk losing you too." Emily melted into his embrace, feeling all his masculine strength enveloping her, the smell of his cologne that had already become addictive to her. "Then don't lose me," she whispered in his ear. "Fight for me." Henry's response was to kiss her with a hunger that spoke of weeks of repressed desire. But this time, there was no gentleness in the kiss. There was desperation, possessiveness, the urgent need to mark territory. Emily responded with equal intensity, her hands closing on his shirt, her body pressing against his in a primitive dance she had never experienced. "We shouldn't be doing this," Henry murmured against her lips. "Why not?" "Because when I touch you, I forget all the reasons why this is a bad idea." "Then stop thinking," Emily said, surprising herself with her own audacity. Henry looked her in the eyes, seeing something in them that made him make an irreversible decision. Without warning, he lifted her in his arms, sitting her on the kitchen counter, positioning himself between her legs in an intimacy that made the world disappear around them. "Emily," he whispered, his hands running through her hair, her neck, her shoulders. "Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure that I've never wanted anything so much in my life." "And your virginity? Your principles about waiting and purity?" "My principles changed when I met you," she answered with brutal honesty. "I discovered that purity isn't about not feeling desire, but about giving it to the right person." The groan that escaped Henry's throat was almost animal. He kissed her again, this time letting his hands explore forbidden territories, discovering the curves of the feminine body over her clothes, drawing small sounds of pleasure that Emily never knew she could make. It was when his fingers found the hem of her blouse, beginning to lift it slowly, that the sound of footsteps on the floor above made them freeze. "Benjamin," Henry said, moving away abruptly. "He must be going to the bathroom," Emily whispered, trying to control her accelerated breathing. They remained immobile for a few minutes, listening to the sounds of the nocturnal house, until they were sure the boy had returned to his room. "This is madness," Henry said, running his hands through his hair in an attempt to recompose himself. "Anyone could have come down, but no one did. Emily, you don't understand what's at stake here. If someone discovers about us, you'll be fired immediately. They'll say you're an adventuress, that you're trying to take advantage of the situation. Your reputation will be ruined. And yours? Mine?" He laughed without humor. They'll say it's normal, that a widowed man needs distraction. The social difference between us guarantees that I come out unscathed and you get destroyed." Emily got down from the counter, smoothing her rumpled clothes. "So, what are you proposing? That we forget what's happening between us? I'm proposing that we be sensible. Sense isn't what I'm feeling when you kiss me. And what do you feel?" Emily looked him directly in the eyes, deciding it was time for complete honesty. "I feel that I've found the man for whom it's worth losing everything. I feel that I prefer one day being truly loved by you than an entire lifetime pretending I don't feel anything." Henry remained silent for a long moment, fighting with internal demons that she couldn't see. "And if I can't give you a whole lifetime? And if I can only give you stolen moments, secret encounters, a love that needs to hide in the shadows?" "Then give me that," Emily answered without hesitation. "Give me what you can give, and I'll make every second count." His response was to pull her into his arms again, kissing her with a desperate tenderness that spoke of decisions made and bridges burned. "You'll regret me," he murmured against her lips. "Impossible," she responded. "I'll regret everything I didn't live, never what I lived intensely." That night, they separated with silent promises hanging in the air. Emily went up to her room knowing she had changed forever, that she had crossed a line from which there was no return. And Henry remained in the kitchen for another hour, looking at the photograph that had triggered so many revelations, wondering if destiny was cruel enough to make a daughter pay for her father's mistakes, or generous enough to give him a second chance to love without fear. What neither of them knew was that someone else had discovered about the connection between Emily and Annabelle's past. And that discovery would set in motion a series of events that would test not only the love between them, but their very lives. The next morning, Emily found a note under her door. It wasn't signed, the words were cut out from magazines and pasted on white paper. "Some daughters repeat their parents' mistakes, others pay for them. Be careful not to discover which type you are." Emily woke up with trembling fingers and racing heart. The note was on the bedside table, where she had left it the previous night after reading it dozens of times, as if the words could change meaning by sheer force of will. The letters cut out from magazines seemed to silently scream threats in the soft morning light. She dressed quickly and went down for breakfast, pretending normalcy, but Teresa immediately noticed something was wrong. "Girl, did you sleep poorly?" asked the housekeeper, serving steaming coffee in a white porcelain cup. "You have dark circles under your eyes." "Just a bit of insomnia," Emily lied, avoiding looking directly at Teresa. Henry arrived a few minutes later, dressed for another day at the winery, but his eyes immediately sought Emily's. There was something different about him too, a tension in his shoulders, a more careful way of moving, as if he were constantly alert. "Good morning," he said formally, but Emily caught the subtext in the way he pronounced the words. "Good morning, Mr. Henry," she responded, but her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the coffee cup. Benjamin came running down the stairs, backpack on, excited for another day of school. The boy's normalcy contrasted brutally with the tension hovering between the adults. "Daddy, can you pick me up from school today?" he asked, attacking the bread with jelly that Teresa had prepared. "I might get back a little late from the winery," Henry replied, but there was something distant in his voice. "Emily can pick you up." "Okay," Benjamin accepted without questioning, but Emily noticed that he detected the change in his father's behavior. After the boy left for school and Teresa busied herself with household tasks, Emily found a moment to approach Henry in the hall. "I need to talk to you," she whispered, looking around to make sure they were alone. "About last night." "About that too, but there's something more urgent." Henry studied her with renewed attention, noticing the poorly disguised fear in her eyes. "Let's go to the library," he said, leading her to the most private room in the house. Once in the library, with the door closed, Emily took the note from maid her pocket and handed it to Henry without saying a word. She watched his expression gradually change. Surprise, concern, and then a cold anger she had never seen before. "When did you find this?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "This morning, under my door." Henry examined the note more closely, analyzing the type of paper, the glue used, the pattern of the cut-out letters. "It's the same pattern as the notes Annabelle received," he said finally. Emily felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Annabelle received notes like this? In the last months before her death. At first they were subtle, just suggestions that she stop meddling in matters that didn't concern her. Later, they became more direct, more threatening. "And you never discovered who was sending them?" "We tried. I hired a private detective, installed security cameras, but whoever was doing this was very clever. They never left clues." Emily sat in one of the leather armchairs, feeling her legs weaken. "Henry, I'm scared." He approached, kneeling in front of her and taking her hands. In his, "I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." "How can you promise that if you couldn't protect Annabelle?" The question came out harsher than she intended, but it was the raw truth that both needed to face. Henry recoiled as if he had been slapped. "You're right," he said, his voice laden with guilt. "I couldn't protect her, but this time will be different." "Why?" "Because this time, I know there's danger. Annabelle didn't believe someone would really harm her. She thought they were just attempts at intimidation. I believed that too, until it was too late." Emily squeezed his hands, trying to transmit strength through the touch. "What are we going to do?" "We're going to find out who's behind this, and we're going to discover once and for all what really happened to Annabelle." "How?" Henry stood up, beginning to pace the library with the concentrated energy of someone who had made an important decision. "Annabelle kept a diary. We didn't find it after her death, but I know it existed. She wrote in it every night before going to sleep. And you think it might have clues about what she discovered?" "I'm sure of it. The question is where it's hidden." "Did you search the house?" "I turned over every corner of this mansion, but Annabelle was smart, creative. If she wanted to hide something really important, she would choose a place where no one would think to look." Emily remained silent for a few minutes, thinking about the possibilities. "And at the winery, did you look there?" "Superficially, but the winery is huge, has dozens of offices, warehouses, underground cellars. If she hid the diary there..." "Then let's look," Emily said, standing up with determination. "Emily, it could be dangerous. More dangerous than staying here waiting for the next note or the next threat." Henry looked at her with growing admiration. The timid woman who had arrived a month ago was transforming before his eyes into a force of nature. "All right," he said finally, "but we do this together and very carefully." "When?" "Tonight, after Benjamin is asleep, we'll go to the winery as if it were a romantic visit. If anyone sees us, that's what it will look like." The idea of a romantic visit made Emily's heart race, but she focused on the mission. "And if we find the diary? Then we'll have the answers we need, and maybe enough evidence to discover who killed my wife." The day passed slowly, each minute dragging like an hour. Emily tried to maintain the normal routine. She picked up Benjamin from school, helped him with his lessons, participated in the family dinner, but she felt as if everyone could see the anxiety written on her face. Benjamin, with the peculiar sensitivity of children, noticed that something was different. "Emily, are you okay?" he asked during his bath. "You're strange today." "I'm just a little tired," she lied, soaping the boy's curly hair. "And Daddy is strange too. Did you fight?" The innocent question caught her off guard. "Why do you think we fought?" "Because you don't look at each other like you used to." Emily stopped washing the boy's hair, surprised by his perception. "How did we look at each other before?" "Like you liked each other," Benjamin said with the brutal simplicity of children. "Like how Daddy used to look at Mommy in the old photos." Emily's heart tightened. If an 8-year-old boy could perceive the chemistry between them, who else had noticed? "Benjamin," she said, choosing her words carefully, "if you notice this, other people might have noticed too. It's important that you don't comment about this with anyone, okay?" "Why?" "Because sometimes adults make things complicated when they don't need to be. But you do like Daddy, don't you?" Emily took a deep breath, deciding that partial honesty would be better than a complete lie. "Yes, I do, very much. But it's a complicated situation." "Because of Mommy?" "Because of many things." Benjamin was thoughtful for a few minutes. "You know what I think?" he said finally. "What?" "I think Mommy would want Daddy to be happy again, and I think she would like you." The boy's words touched Emily deeply. She finished giving him his bath in silence, too emotional to trust her own voice. After putting Benjamin to bed and reading the usual story, Emily went down to find Henry waiting in the hall. He had exchanged his suit for more casual clothes, dark jeans and a cotton shirt that made his eyes seem even more intense. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." The journey to the winery was made in relative silence, both absorbed in their own thoughts and anxieties. When they arrived, the place seemed completely different at night, more mysterious, almost sinister, under the light of the full moon. Henry used his keys to enter through the main entrance, disabling the alarm system with a code that only he knew. "Where do we start?" Emily asked, looking around the main office. "With the office that Annabelle used. There might be some clue that went unnoticed." Annabelle's office had been kept exactly as she had left it 3 years before. There were still photos of her on the walls, plants that someone continued to water, a coffee cup forgotten on the desk that no one had dared to remove. It was like a sanctuary preserved in time. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine as she entered the environment. There was something deeply disturbing about being in the personal space of a dead woman, going through her intimate belongings. "It's strange," she murmured, as if she might appear at any moment. "I felt that at the beginning too," Henry said, methodically opening drawers. "But then I realized that preserving this place like this was morbid. Annabelle would hate to be remembered as a ghost." "Then why did you keep everything this way?" "Because Alexander insisted, said it was important to keep her memory alive for the employees, for the clients. Now I realize that maybe he had other motives." "Dange Alexander," Emily repeated the name, remembering the conversation she had overheard between the two men. "Do you suspect him?" "I suspect everyone who had access to the winery's financial files. Alexander, the accountant, some of the older employees. And if we don't find anything here, then we look in the lake house." Emily stopped searching on a bookshelf. "What lake house?" "Annabelle had a small house on the shores of the lake where she died. It was her personal refuge, the place she went when she needed to think, write, be alone. If she hid something really important, it was there." "And why don't we start there?" "Because it's a 20-minute walk along the trail in the middle of the woods. It's dangerous at night, and if someone followed us..." Henry didn't need to finish the sentence. Both understood that being in the winery's main house was already risky enough. They spent 2 hours systematically searching the office. Emily found some sparse notes from Annabelle, but nothing that seemed significant. Henry found some discrepancies. in the financial files, but nothing that constituted definitive proof of fraud. "It's not here," he said, finally frustrated. "We'll have to go to the lake house." "Henry, maybe we should leave it for another day." "No," he interrupted with determination. "Someone knows you're investigating. The notes are not a coincidence. We need to find evidence before they try to stop us." Emily nodded, although every instinct told her she was about to do something very dangerous. They left the winery's main house and followed a narrow trail that wound between the grapevines. The moon provided enough light for them to walk without flashlights, but also left their silhouettes visible to anyone who might be watching. The path descended gently toward the lake, passing through a wilder area where the vines gave way to native forest. Emily could hear the soft sound of water hitting the shore long before she could see the lake. The house was smaller than she had imagined, a simple wooden construction with a large veranda facing the water. Even in the dark, it was possible to perceive that the place had been designed for contemplation and solitude. Henry used another key to open the main door. The interior smelled of mold and abandonment, but Emily could distinguish the contours of furniture covered by white sheets, like ghosts waiting to be awakened. "She came here every week," Henry said, lighting an oil lamp he found on a side table. "She said she needed the silence to think." The soft light of the lamp revealed a cozy environment. There was a stone fireplace, shelves full of books, a comfortable armchair turned to the window that faced the lake. It was the kind of place where a person could feel completely isolated from the world. "It's beautiful," Emily murmured. "I understand why she liked to come here." "Start with the desk," Henry suggested, pointing to an old dark wood piece of furniture near the window. "I'll look in the other rooms." Emily approached the desk, feeling like an intruder violating a dead woman's privacy. The drawers were full of various papers, personal correspondence, drafts of poems, old shopping lists. But in a side drawer, her fingers found something different. It was a small key, the type used in safety boxes or secret drawers. It was attached with adhesive tape to the bottom of the drawer, hidden in such a way that only someone searching systematically would find it. "Henry!" she called, keeping her voice low. "I found something." He appeared immediately, carrying the lamp. "What is it?" "A key. It was hidden in the drawer." Henry examined the key under the light, furrowing his brow. "I don't recognize it. It's not for any lock that I know in the house or the winery. Then it must open something she wanted to keep very secure." They spent the next few minutes looking for anything the key could open. Boxes, small chests, secret drawers. But they found nothing. "Maybe it's for a bank safe," Emily suggested. "Possible. I'll check tomorrow if she had a registered safe. In any bank." It was when Henry was putting the key in his pocket that they heard the sound. Footsteps on the external veranda, trying to be silent, but not managing to avoid the creaking of the old wooden boards. The two froze, looking at each other with growing terror. Henry quickly blew out the lamp, plunging the environment into almost total darkness. "The back window," he whispered in Emily's ear, so low that she more read his lips than heard the words. But it was already too late. The main door opened violently, and 3 male figures entered the house, powerful flashlights in hand, sweeping the environment. "I know you're there," said a voice that Emily recognized with horror. It was Alexander. "We saw you enter the winery. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." Henry pushed Emily in the direction of what he hoped was an exit through the back, but one of the men had already positioned himself there. They were surrounded. "Alexander," Henry said, coming out of the shadows with his hands raised. "What does this mean?" "It means That you didn't know when to stop, Henry. Annabelle didn't know either. Look what happened to her. Emily's blood froze. There was the confession they needed, but in the worst possible circumstances. It was you. Henry said. It wasn't a question. You killed my wife. I didn't want to, Alexander replied, but there was no regret in his voice. She was too stubborn. She insisted on meddling where she shouldn't. She threatened to expose years of careful work. What work? Stealing from the company she helped build. Stealing? Alexander laughed without humor. I built this winery as much as you did. I deserved my share of the profits, not just an employee's salary. And now you're going to kill us too? Emily asked, surprised by her own calm. Initially, that wasn't the intention, Alexander replied, studying her with cold interest. You were just a minor complication. But then we discovered your true identity, daughter of the pastor who almost destroyed Annabelle and Henry's marriage before it even began. How did you discover that? It wasn't difficult. Joseph Adams isn't a common name, and you have his eyes. Annabelle used to talk about his eyes. Emily felt nausea rising in her throat. Everything had been planned from the beginning. It was you who hired me, she realized. The employment agency, the recommendation to work here, it was all a setup. Very intelligent, Alexander smiled coldly. The original idea was to use you to emotionally destabilize Henry, to make him make bad business decisions. We didn't expect you to actually fall in love. And now you both know too much, and unlike Annabelle, who died alone, you two are going to die together. A crime of passion, perhaps. Henry went crazy with grief, killed the nanny with whom he had become obsessed, and then committed suicide. The coldness with which Alexander planned their deaths left Emily paralyzed with terror, but Henry was calculating distances, looking for some way to fight back. Alexander, think about what you're doing, he tried. Benjamin will be orphaned. Do you really want that on your conscience? Benjamin will inherit everything, and I'll continue managing in his name until he reaches adulthood. 25 years is enough time for me to secure my future. It was when Alexander signaled to the other men that Henry acted. In a sudden movement, he threw himself against the closest one, trying to disarm him. Emily screamed, but also reacted, grabbing the oil lamp and throwing it at Alexander. The glass broke, the oil spread, and suddenly there was fire spreading across the wooden floor. In the chaos that followed, with shouts and desperate movements, Emily and Henry managed to run to the veranda. "The lake!" Henry shouted. "Jump in the lake!" They ran along the shore, while behind them the house began to catch fire seriously. Emily could hear Alexander shouting orders to the other men, the sound of footsteps in pursuit. When they reached the water's edge, Henry hesitated for just a second. "Can you swim?" "Yes." "Then let's go." They threw themselves into the dark water of the lake, the cold cutting like knives. Emily fought against panic, forcing herself to swim in the direction of the opposite shore. Behind them, she could hear shots being fired, but the darkness and distance protected them. They swam in silence for about 15 minutes until they reached a small cove on the opposite shore. When they finally emerged from the water, trembling from cold and adrenaline, Emily collapsed on the grass, breathless. "We have to call the police," she said, as soon as she could catch her breath. "With what proof?" Henry responded bitterly. "Our word against his. And now we don't even have the key that Annabelle hid, don't we?" Emily smiled for the first time since the nightmare had begun, taking the small key from the pocket of her wet pants. "I took it when you were fighting with the man." Henry looked at her with growing admiration. "You're amazing." "I'm a survivor," she corrected. "And now we're going to find out what this key opens and finish this once and for all." But first, they needed to get home, dry off, and check if Benjamin was safe. because Emily was sure that Alexander wouldn't give up easily. They had crossed a line of no return, and now it was open war. The war for justice, for love, and for a chance to build a life together on the ruins of the past. The walk back to the mansion was a nightmare of anxiety and paranoia. Emily and Henry kept to the shadows, avoiding the main roads, cutting through the woods that separated the winery from the residential property. Their wet clothes stuck to their bodies. The cold of the early morning cut their skin like blades, but neither complained. They were alive, and that was more than they could have hoped for an hour earlier. "We need to check if Benjamin is okay," Henry said for the 10th time, his voice hoarse with worry. "He's fine," Emily tried to reassure him, although she herself was terrified. Alexander wouldn't do anything against a child with so many witnesses in the house. "You don't know what he's capable of. Not like I know now." When they finally spotted the lights of the mansion, both ran the last few meters. Henry opened the back door carefully, paying attention to any sound that might indicate unusual movement in the house. Everything seemed normal, the typical silence of early morning, the usual noises of an old house. "I'll check on Benjamin," Emily whispered. "I'll go with you." They climbed the stairs slowly, avoiding the steps they knew creaked. The door to Benjamin's room was ajar, as it always was. Emily peeked through the gap and saw the boy sleeping peacefully, the blanket pulled up to his chin, his curly hair spread on the pillow. "He's okay," she murmured, feeling enormous relief. "Thank God," Henry breathed deeply. "Now we need to change and find out what this key opens." "What if Alexander comes back? He won't attack the mansion tonight. It would be suicide with all the staff here, but tomorrow we'll have to make difficult decisions." They separated in the corridors, each going to their room to change clothes. Emily took a quick hot shower, trying to get the cold out of her bones and the smell of smoke and lake water out of her hair. When she looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized the woman staring back at her. There was something different in her eyes, a hardness that didn't exist a month before. She put on jeans and a wool sweater, took the key she had hidden in a drawer, and went down to meet Henry in the library. He was already there, also dressed casually, his hair still damp, from the shower, studying some papers he had spread on the table. "I found something," he said as soon as she entered. "I remembered where I've seen a key like this before." "Where?" "Annabelle had a small safe installed in the wall of our bedroom closet. I thought it was for jewelry, personal documents. I never paid much attention." Emily felt her heart accelerate. "And you'd never opened it after her death?" "I tried, but I couldn't find the key. I presumed she had lost it or hidden it somewhere I couldn't discover." "Then let's open it now." Henry hesitated. "Emily, do we have the right to do this? They were her personal things, secrets she chose not to share with me while she was alive." "Henry," she approached, putting her hands on his shoulders, "Annabelle was murdered because she discovered something that someone wanted to keep hidden. She may have left evidence that not only proves Alexander's guilt, but that keeps us alive. I think she would want us to use anything she saved to bring justice." He looked her in the eyes, seeing the determination that had solidified in her during the last hours of terror. "You're right," he said finally. "Let's go." The master bedroom of the mansion was an elegant suite, decorated in shades of blue and gold that reminded one of a European palace. Emily had never entered there before, and she felt like an intruder exploring the intimate sanctuary of a marriage. There were still Annabelle's personal objects scattered on the dressing table, perfumes in crystal bottles, jewelry left casually, a hairbrush with blonde strands still caught in the bristles. The closet was the size of a small room, with organized shelves that showed Annabelle's refined taste. Henry went directly to a side wall where Emily could see a small, embedded safe, almost invisible, among the wooden panels. "Here," he said, pointing to the safe. Emily inserted the key with trembling hands. For a moment she feared it wasn't the right key, that they were following a false lead. But when she turned it, there was a soft click and the small door opened. Inside was a pile of documents, some jewelry, and a red leather notebook that could only be the diary they were looking for. "This is it," Henry said, his voice laden with emotion. "It's her diary." Emily picked up the notebook carefully, as if it were made of crystal. The cover was worn from use, and when she opened it, she saw Annabelle's delicate handwriting filling page after page. "Do you want to read first?" she offered to Henry. "You read," he said. "I don't know if I can. It's still too difficult." Emily began to leaf through the pages, looking for the most recent entries. Most of the notes were everyday thoughts, reflections on motherhood, plans for the winery. But in the last weeks before the death, the tone changed drastically. "Here," she said, finding an entry dated 3 weeks before the murder. "Listen to this. Alexander doesn't know I've discovered the fake contracts. For years he's been diverting money through fictitious suppliers. The amount already exceeds 2 million. Henry will be devastated when he finds out, but he needs to know. The company we built together is being robbed from within." Henry closed his eyes, as if the words were physical blows. 2 million, he murmured. "I trusted him like a brother." Emily continued reading. "Alexander is suspecting I've discovered something. He asked strange questions about my routine, about the files I've been reviewing. I need to be more careful. I need to gather evidence before confronting him." The following entries systematically documented Annabelle's investigation. She had photographed documents, copied contracts, tracked bank transfers. Everything was meticulously recorded, with dates, values, names. "She built a complete case," Emily said, amazed. "Here's all the evidence we need." But it was the last entry that made both their blood freeze. "Alexander knows. I don't know how, but he knows I've discovered everything. He called me for a meeting tomorrow night at the lake house. He said he wants to talk about our situation. I'm afraid, but I need to confront him. If something happens to me, I hope Henry finds this diary and discovers the truth. I love my husband and my son more than life itself. If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident." The silence that followed was laden with pain and anger. Henry sat heavily on the edge of the bed, his face in his hands. "She knew," he said, his voice broken. "She knew she was going to die, and she went anyway." "Because she loved you," Emily said softly. "Because she wanted to protect you, and I let it happen. For 3 years I believed the official version, believed it had been a stupid accident." Emily approached him, gently touching his shoulder. "You had no way of knowing. Alexander is an expert manipulator. He fooled all of you for years." "But now we know the truth." Henry raised his face, and Emily saw in his eyes a fierce determination. "And we're going to use it to destroy him." "How?" "First thing tomorrow morning, we go to the police with the diary and all the documentation. We're going to demand they reopen the investigation into Annabelle's death. And if Alexander tries to stop us, he will try. That's why Benjamin can't go to school tomorrow. In fact, I think we should take him to a safe place until all this is resolved." Emily nodded, but after everything they had been through, a new urgency began to burn within her. The awareness of mortality, the perception of how fragile and unpredictable life was, made her make a decision that had been forming during the last hours of terror. "Henry," she said, her voice lower. "Yes, poor. I don't want to die without having fully lived." He looked at her, not immediately understanding what she meant. "Emily, tonight, We almost lost everything. I almost died without ever having known true love, without ever having completely given myself to someone who's worth it. Henry slowly stood up, approaching her with an intensity that made the air in the suite feel charged. Are you sure about what you're saying? I'm sure that I love you, she said, the words coming out with a brutal honesty that surprised her. I'm sure that I want to be yours completely before the world tries to separate us again. Emily, you know that if we're together in this way, there's no going back. Your life will change forever. My life already changed forever the moment I met you. Henry cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs caressing her cheeks with a desperate tenderness. I love you too, he said, finally admitting what both had known for weeks. I love you in a way that scares me, in a way I didn't think it was possible to love again. Then love me completely, she whispered. Make me truly yours. Henry then kissed her with a passion that spoke of all the weeks of repressed desire, of all the stolen moments, of all the adrenaline of the night that had almost killed them. Emily responded with equal intensity, her hands closing on his shirt, her body pressing against his in a primitive urgency. Not here, he murmured against her lips. Not in the room I shared with Annabelle. Then where? My office. There's a sofa there, and we can lock the door. They went down the stairs embracing, stopping every few steps to kiss again, their hands exploring territories that had been forbidden until then. When they reached the office, Henry carefully locked the door and turned to find Emily already taking off her sweater. Are you sure? He asked one last time. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. What happened between them in the next hours was a mixture of tenderness and passion, of discovery and surrender. Henry was gentle with Emily's inexperience, but she was surprisingly bold in her response to him. It was as if all the years of repression had exploded in an urgent need to feel everything, experience everything, live intensely every second. When they finally separated, breathless and satiated, Emily nestled against Henry's chest on the leather sofa, feeling as if she had been completely remade. I don't regret it, she said, anticipating any doubt he might have. Neither do I, he responded, kissing the top of her head. But now you're my responsibility in every possible way, and you are mine. What are we going to do about Benjamin, about our situation? Emily leaned on her elbow to look him in the eyes. Let's survive all this first, then we'll think about the rest, and if we don't survive, then at least we'll have had this night. Henry pulled her closer, and Emily could feel his heart beating strongly against her ear. Don't say that. We will survive. We'll have a life together. You, me, and Benjamin. We'll transform this tragedy into something beautiful. Do you really believe that? I need to believe it. Otherwise, nothing makes sense. They fell asleep, embracing on the sofa, physically and emotionally exhausted. But it wasn't a peaceful sleep. Both woke up several times during the few hours that remained of the early morning, alert to any noise that might indicate danger. When the sun began to rise, bringing golden light through the office windows, Henry awakened Emily with soft kisses on her neck. We need to get dressed, he whispered. Benjamin will wake up soon, and Teresa arrives early. They dressed quickly, trying to erase any evidence of what had happened there. But when Emily looked at herself in the mirror of the bathroom attached to the office, she saw that there was something different about her face, a luminosity that wasn't there before, a confidence that came from having been completely loved. How do we behave now? She asked, smoothing her disheveled hair. Like we always behave in front of others, Henry responded, professionally, But now we know it's just a facade. And Benjamin? Benjamin already suspected there was something between us. He's too smart not to notice. And will he be okay with it? Henry stopped fixing his tie to look at her seriously. Benjamin needs a mother. Annabelle was a wonderful mother, but she's gone. If he can have you in her place, I think she would be happy with the choice. Emily felt her eyes fill with tears. Do you really think that? I'm sure of it. They left the office separately, Emily going to the kitchen to help Teresa with breakfast and Henry going upstairs to wake Benjamin. The morning followed an apparently normal routine, but both were tense, waiting for some sign that Alexander would make his next move. Benjamin immediately noticed that something was different. "Daddy, why can't I go to school today?" he asked during breakfast. "Because we have some important things to resolve," Henry responded carefully. "Maybe you can spend the day at Grandma Martha's house." Martha was Henry's mother, a 70-year-old lady who lived on a rural property 2 hours from Chicago. "I can take Benjamin there," Emily offered. "It would be safer." "No," Henry refused immediately. "You come with me to the police station. I need a witness for everything we're going to report. And if Alexander follows us, that's why we're going to leave separately. You take Benjamin to my mother's house. I'll go directly to the police. We'll meet there at 2 in the afternoon." It was a risky plan, but it was the best they could devise under the circumstances. Emily packed some clothes for Benjamin, along with some toys and books. Henry called his mother, vaguely explaining that he needed to leave his grandson with her for a few days due to business problems. "Be careful," Henry said to Emily when she was leaving with Benjamin. "If you notice you're being followed, don't. Go to my mother's house. Go directly to the police station. And you be careful too." They separated with a quick kiss, hidden from Benjamin's eyes, but the boy noticed anyway. "Are you dating now?" he asked in the car, with the typical curiosity of children. Emily almost laughed at the simplicity of the question, considering everything they had lived through in the last 24 hours. "It's complicated, Benjamin. Why do adults always say things are complicated when they're actually simple? What do you mean? You like each other, you take care of each other, you make each other smile. Doesn't seem complicated to me." The innocent wisdom of the boy touched Emily deeply. He was right. At the center of all the confusion, the secrets, the dangers, was a simple truth. She and Henry loved each other. "You're right," she said finally. "Sometimes simple things become complicated because of other people. Like Uncle Alexander." The question made her freeze. Benjamin shouldn't know anything about Alexander's involvement. "Why did you mention Uncle Alexander?" "Because every time he comes to the house, Daddy is sad afterward. And last night I heard him talking with other men in the garden. They were looking for you." Emily felt her heart race. If Alexander had been at the mansion. "What else did you hear, Benjamin?" "They said you had escaped from the lake, but that they wouldn't give up, and that today they would finish what they started." Emily stepped hard on the accelerator. They couldn't go to Henry's mother's house. It was too obvious. And they couldn't return to the mansion. There was only one option left. "Benjamin, we're going to have to make a small change of plans," she said, picking up her cell phone to call Henry. But before she could dial, she saw in the rearview mirror 2 black cars approaching rapidly. "Hold on tight, dear," she said to Benjamin. "We're going to have to run a little bit." The 8-year-old boy, with the sharp intuition he had inherited from his parents, immediately understood the gravity of the situation. "Emily," he said, with a seriousness that didn't match his age, "if something happens to us, will you protect Daddy too?" "Nothing is going to happen to anyone," she responded, but accelerated even more. desperately trying to reach the police station before Alexander could catch up to them. The chase had begun, and this time there was no lake to hide in. There was only a road, 2 cars full of armed men, and the fierce determination of a woman who had discovered she had much more to lose and much more to fight for than she had ever imagined. Emily drove through the streets of Chicago with a skill she didn't know she possessed, weaving through the morning traffic, taking alleys she had known since childhood when she visited the city with her mother. The 2 black cars followed her relentlessly, maintaining a calculated distance. They didn't want to cause an accident that would draw too much attention, but they also weren't going to let her escape. "Emily, are they still behind us?" Benjamin asked, trying to sound brave but with a slightly trembling voice. "They are, but don't worry. We're almost at the police station." In reality, they were still 15 minutes from the central police station, and Emily knew she wouldn't be able to maintain that advantage for much longer. The fuel was low, the car was less powerful than those pursuing them, and she was beginning to get mentally exhausted. It was when she saw the sign indicating the way to the university campus that she had a desperate idea. "Benjamin, do you trust me?" "Of course I trust you." "Then we're going to do something a little different." Emily turned sharply to the right, entering the campus of the University of Chicago. It was an environment she knew well from the time when she had studied education. A labyrinth of buildings, squares, and parking lots where it would be easy to hide or confuse pursuers. The black cars hesitated at the entrance, clearly not expecting that maneuver. Emily took advantage of the few seconds of advantage to accelerate toward the education faculty building, where she knew there was a security booth with guards and telephones. She stopped the car abruptly in front of the building and ran out, with Benjamin by the hand, shouting to the security guards who were at the entrance, "Please, call the police. We're being chased." The 2 security guards, middle-aged men accustomed to strange situations on campus, reacted immediately. One of them led Emily and Benjamin inside the building, while the other positioned himself at the entrance, speaking on the radio with the security central. "What's happening, ma'am?" asked the security guard who had accompanied them. "Armed men are trying to kidnap us," Emily explained quickly. "I need to speak to the police urgently." Through the windows, she could see the 2 black cars parked outside, but the men didn't get out. They knew it would be madness to try something inside the university campus, with witnesses and security guards everywhere. The security guard handed his cell phone to Emily. "Call whoever you need." Emily dialed Henry's number with trembling fingers. He answered on the first ring. "Emily, where are you? I haven't been able to reach you for an hour." "We're at the University of Chicago campus in the education building. Alexander followed us, Henry. They know about everything." "I'm coming there now. Don't leave there for anything." "And the police?" "I'm bringing the police too. I've already delivered a copy of the diary. They're preparing the arrest warrant for Alexander." Emily hung up and sat in a chair in the reception, hugging Benjamin against her chest. The boy was frightened, but trying to be brave. "Emily," he said softly, "if Uncle Alexander's a bad man, why didn't Daddy know?" "Because sometimes bad people are very good at pretending they're good," she explained carefully. "Your daddy trusted him like family." "Like Mommy trusted him too?" "Yes, like Mommy trusted him too." Benjamin was thoughtful for a few minutes. "Mommy, him found out he was bad. Is that why she died?" Emily hesitated. The boy was too intelligent to be deceived with half-truths, but also too young to carry the full weight of the truth. "Your mommy discovered he was doing wrong things in the business. She wanted to protect her family. And now he wants to hurt you and Daddy because you discovered the same thing." "That's right." Benjamin nodded solemnly, as if he were processing complex information. Then you're protecting us like Mommy tried to protect us." The simplicity with which he summed everything up made Emily's eyes fill with tears. "I'm trying, sweetheart." "Does that mean you're going to be my new mom?" The innocent question caught her completely off guard. Emily looked at the boy, his big, serious eyes, his hopeful expression, and felt her heart tighten with love. "Would you like me to be?" "I'd like it very much. But only if you promise you won't go away like Mommy did." "Benjamin," Emily knelt in front of him, holding his small hands. "I promise I'll fight with all my strength to never leave you or your daddy. Even if it's dangerous. Especially if it's dangerous." The boy smiled for the first time since the chase had begun and threw himself into Emily's arms in a tight hug. "Then I want you to be my mom," he murmured. Against her shoulder, Emily was openly crying when Henry arrived running, followed by 2 police officers. He spotted the two embracing, and for a moment it seemed he would collapse with relief. "Are you okay?" he asked, joining the hug. "We're okay," Emily responded, "but Alexander is still out there." One of the police officers, a middle-aged sergeant, with a competent air, approached. "Ma'am, Mr. Lawrence has told us about the situation. We need you to come with us to give a formal statement and present the evidence." "And Benjamin?" "The boy can stay here with the university security guards while we resolve this. It will be safer." "No," Benjamin protested immediately. "I want to stay with you." "Son," Henry said, softly, "it's going to be boring with lots of questions and paperwork. It's better for you to stay here." "Daddy, I'm not a little kid anymore," Benjamin said with a seriousness that impressed everyone. "I understand what's happening. Uncle, Alexander killed Mommy, and now he wants to hurt you too. I want to help put him in jail." The adults looked at each other, recognizing that the boy had matured a lot in the last few hours. "All right," Henry finally agreed. "But you stay quiet and let the adults talk. I promise." They left the building escorted by the police officers. The black cars were still parked outside, but now there were 3 police vehicles surrounding them. Emily could see Alexander being handcuffed and placed in one of the police cars, along with 4 other men. "It's over," Henry said, putting his arm around Emily's shoulders. "It's finally over." But Emily knew it was just beginning. The dangerous part was over, but now began the part of rebuilding a life, a family, a future from the ruins of the past. At the police station, Emily and Henry spent 3 hours giving detailed statements about everything they had discovered. Annabelle's diary was examined and considered crucial evidence. The documents she had copied proved systematic fraud going back 5 years before her death. "It will be a complex case," explained the detective in charge. "But we have enough evidence to keep Alexander Morgan in custody while we investigate. Annabelle's homicide will be reclassified as premeditated murder." "And my family's safety?" Henry asked. "With Alexander in prison and his accomplices also detained, you're no longer in immediate danger. But we'll maintain patrols in the mansion area for a few weeks, just as a precaution." When they finally left the police station, it was almost night. Benjamin was exhausted, dozing in Emily's lap while they waited for the taxi that would take them back home. "And now?" Emily asked Henry. "Now we try to return to normal, or discover what normal is for us." "Henry, about what happened last night?" "Don't regret it," he interrupted gently. "Please don't regret it." "I'm not regretting it. I'm worried about the practical consequences. What are we going to tell the staff, the family, the friends?" Henry turned to look her directly in the eyes. "We're going to tell the truth, that we fell in love, that we didn't plan it, but it happened, and that we're going to build a life together if you want. And if people talk, they will talk, they always do. But do you prefer to live your life or live others' opinions?" Emily smiled, remembering a similar conversation they had had weeks before. I prefer to live my life. Then that's what we're going to do. The taxi arrived and took them back to the mansion, where Teresa was waiting anxiously. The housekeeper had spent the entire day worried, not knowing where everyone was or what was happening. "Thank God you're all right," she said, hugging each one in turn. "What's this story about police and dangerous people?" Henry explained briefly about the discovery of Alexander's fraud and his arrest, omitting the more sordid details out of consideration for the older woman's feelings. "Alexander?" Teresa shook her head, incredulous. "I never liked him, but I never imagined." "Poor Annabelle. At least now she'll have justice," Emily said softly. Teresa looked at her with new affection, as if finally seeing her not as a temporary employee, but as a permanent part of the family. "And you too?" she asked with the frankness that came from decades of living with the Lawrence family. "When are you going to stop pretending you're just employer and employee?" Emily blushed violently, but Henry laughed. "You knew?" "A 5-year-old child would know," Teresa retorted. "You look at each other like you're the only two people in the world, and the boy is already calling her mom when he thinks no one is listening." "Is that true?" Henry asked Benjamin, who was waking up on the sofa where they had placed him. "Of course it's true," the boy said, rubbing his eyes. "She protected me today. She always protects me. Isn't that what moms do?" The simplicity of Benjamin's logic left all the adults emotional. "Then it's settled," Teresa declared with authority. "Emily, you can stop sleeping in that tiny little room up there. And Henry, you can stop walking around the house like a melancholy ghost. You deserve each other." That night, for the first time, Emily went up to the main floor of the mansion, not as an employee, but as the woman of the house. It was strange and exciting at the same time, as if she were crossing a bridge between two completely different lives. Henry was waiting for her in the master suite, but he had changed some things. Annabelle's photos were still there. They always would be, because she was part of the family's history, but now they shared space with a photo of Emily and Benjamin that he had taken the previous week in the garden. "Are you sure about this?" Emily asked, looking around the room that had been the sanctuary of another love. "I'm sure that Annabelle would want me to be happy again, and I'm sure that you're the person who can make me happy. And if people say it was too fast, that I didn't respect her mourning." "Emily," Henry approached, taking her hands, "Annabelle died 3 years ago. I carried grief, guilt, and loneliness all that time. You're not replacing her. You're giving me a second chance to live. Is that how you see it?" "That's how I see it, and that's how she would see it too." That night, they made love again, but it was different from the first time. Without the urgency of desperation, without the fear of imminent death. It was a celebration of life, of survival, of the possibility to start over. In the weeks that followed, life at the Lawrence mansion completely reorganized. Emily officially assumed the role of Henry's companion and Benjamin's adoptive mother. There were comments, of course. There are always comments when people from different worlds unite. But the obvious happiness of the newly formed family soon silenced most of the criticism. Alexander Morgan's trial became one of the most talked about cases in the Chicago press. The evidence gathered by Annabelle was crucial for his conviction. For willful homicide and fraud, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. During the trial, Emily made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She decided to contact her father. Joseph Adams arrived at the courthouse on a rainy winter day, older than Emily remembered, shoulders hunched by the weight of years and regrets. When he saw her sitting next to Henry in the gallery, his expressions went through a series of emotions: surprise, guilt, something that could be pride. After the session, they talked for the first time in more than a year. "You've grown," was the first thing he said. "I've grown far beyond what you could imagine," she responded without bitterness. "I heard you got involved with her husband. The woman that I knew before. Annabelle, her name was Annabelle, and yes, I fell in love with her husband, with the wonderful man she loved after you rejected her." Joseph swallowed hard, clearly uncomfortable with his daughter's brutal honesty. "Emily, you need to understand the pressures I had at that time." "I understand, Dad. I understand that you chose your reputation over love. I understand that you raised your daughter with the rigidity of someone who was running from his own feelings, and I understand that it ended up costing a good woman's life." "What do you mean?" Emily told him about Annabelle's investigation, about the discovery of the family connection, about how the past had intertwined tragically with the present. "If you had been courageous back then," she said finally, "Annabelle wouldn't have married Henry on the rebound. Maybe she wouldn't have gotten so involved in the winery's business. Maybe she wouldn't have discovered Alexander's fraud. Maybe she would still be alive." Joseph seemed to age 10 years in a matter of minutes. "Do you blame me for her death?" "No," Emily answered, and realized she was speaking the truth. "I blame Alexander for her death. But I blame you for wasting an opportunity to be happy and to make someone else happy too. And now, how does it stand between us?" Emily looked at Henry and Benjamin, who were waiting on the other side of the corridor, and felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. "Now you can choose to be part of our family or continue living in the past. Your grandson needs a grandfather. I would like to have my father back. And Henry is generous enough to accept you if you can accept that love isn't a sin." Joseph remained silent for a long time, looking at the grandson he had never really known. "What do I need to do? Just be present, be truthful, and stop judging choices that brought happiness to people you should love." 2 months later, in an intimate ceremony in the winery's chapel, Emily and Henry were married. It was a small wedding, just close family and friends. Benjamin was the ring bearer, radiant with happiness at seeing his new family made official. Teresa cried more than the bride, and Joseph, in a turnaround that no one expected, was the one who walked Emily down the aisle. "Are you sure you're doing the right thing?" he asked at the last moment before giving her to Henry. "I'm sure I'm doing the only right thing I've ever done in my life," she answered. "Then may God bless you," he said, and she realized he was truly blessing the union, not just fulfilling a protocol. The party was held in the winery gardens, in the same place where Annabelle used to walk. But there was no sadness on that day, just the celebration of a family that had found a way to honor the past while building the future. During the party, Emily discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks. The morning sickness, the inexplicable tiredness, the increased emotional sensitivity. But she had chosen to wait for medical confirmation before telling Henry, "I have news," she said to him during the waltz that would close the party. "Good or bad, depends on how you feel about dirty diapers and sleepless nights." Henry stopped dancing in the middle of the music, looking at her with an incredulous expression. "Are you saying that?" "I'm saying that Benjamin is going to have a little brother or sister." Henry picked her up in his arms and spun her in the air, laughing in a way she had never seen him laugh. Free, young, completely happy. "When?" "In 7 months, more or less." "Anna Emily," he said, putting his hands on her face, "you just gave me everything I didn't even know I wanted." "Anna Emily?" "If it's a girl, Anna because of Annabelle, Emily because of you. And if it's a boy, Joseph, for your father, who's trying to be better." Emily kissed her husband with tears of happiness running down her face, knowing they had found a way to honor all the loves that had led to that moment. A year later, Anna Emily Lawrence was born on a sunny spring morning. She was a healthy baby, with dark eyes like her father and light hair like her mother. Benjamin, now 9 years old and officially adopted by Emily, became the most protective and loving brother a child could have. Teresa, who had a